So, Michelle, you've got Trump's own MAGA base. You've got his allies of convenience, if you will, the comedians in the manosphere, and you've got the victims who are not satisfied by any of this. I'm less fluent in what elected Republicans in Congress are saying about this. They seem to have fled with their tails between their legs, and I don't know, maybe this is enough for them. I really don't know. But when you've got MAGA rank and file voters, the victims, and the manosphere voices all saying, you know, line in the sand, this is BS, you are not making much political progress here.
Well, and especially since one of the ways that this administration has justified not releasing the files is saying that it would be re-victimizing these women. So to have the women out there saying that, no, what is victimizing them or what they feel is victimizing them is the process, is the way the administration tried to exploit their, you know, these horrors that they've endured for votes and then refuse transparency once they had the power to do so. I believe I just saw that there's going to be a press conference with Ro Khanna, a Democrat, and Thomas Massie, a Republican, and several of the Epstein victims calling for
on September 3rd. Yeah. It's an incredible coalition that's emerging, Charlie Sykes, and that in and of itself is sort of the man bites dog part of the story. I mean, as Michelle just said, September 3rd in Washington. So, you know, back to school and welcome back to your own man-made political scandal with actual real victims. The women will be speaking in their own words, and they'll be flanked by Democrats and Republicans. This is not going anywhere.
No, this is not going anywhere, and the women are not going anywhere. And I just, you know, briefly, there are survivors, but there are victims who did not survive, and I think we need to remember that. Virginia Giuffre, one of the main witnesses against Ghislaine Maxwell, committed suicide earlier this year. So the human toll is incredible. But you know, the point that has been made, and you know, both Andrew and Michelle have made this point. Look, the Trump administration tomorrow morning could release all of the files. If there is dirt about Democrats in these files, you know, who among us would, you know, doubt that they would not have a press conference? Just last week, Tulsi Gabbard came out and dumped all sorts of, you know, alleged new revelations about the Russia investigation that suggested that Barack Obama was guilty of treason. These people are not holding anything back. And secondly, if Congress is actually interested in finding any truth about all of this, why are they just subpoenaing certain people? Why have they not put out subpoenas for these women who not only have a story to tell, but are obviously quite willing and ready to tell that story? So there is an incredible reluctance to get at the truth, and this counter spin that J.D. Vance is putting out, that it's all liberal Democrats. This is an administration that has shown absolutely no restraint whatsoever in smearing its opponents with real or fabricated information. So, again, none of this adds up, does it?
It's such a good point. I mean, they have this guy that Tillis sank. What is his name? Ed Martin, whose whole job is political prosecutions with nothing based in facts. So if they had actual evidence, if they had videotape evidence of actual crimes by actual Democrats, you'd think that Mr. Martin would have held a press conference and talked about it by now. I need all of you to stick around.
New heat on Donald Trump amid the Epstein uproar, as his latest attempt to slippery slide away from any accountability blows up in federal court. Today, in a scathing ruling, a judge essentially accusing Trump's DOJ of trying to fool the public with, quote, the illusion of transparency. Hours later, in a sign of how this is absolutely dogging Donald Trump, reporters are pressing him about that ruling. It happened during his press conference at the White House.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Madam Attorney General, did the Justice Department appeal the Epstein decision today, Mr. President?
Did you hear that? Yeah, I didn't hear an answer either. Today's ruling concerned the DOJ's request to unseal grand jury material from probes into Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. For weeks, legal experts have said this is a red herring, arguing most of the information is already known and likely to shed very little light on the situation. Today, the federal judge who has seen the material echoing those criticisms and going even further, calling out and rebuking the Trump DOJ. Quote, the DOJ's entire premise that the Maxwell grand jury materials would bring to light meaningful new information about Epstein and Maxwell's crimes or the government's investigation into them is demonstrably false. Adding, quote, a member of the public appreciating that the Maxwell grand jury materials do not contribute anything to public knowledge might conclude that the government's motion for their unsealing was aimed not at transparency, but at diversion, and not at the full disclosure, but the illusion of such. It's unclear whether the DOJ will appeal as time goes by. This is certainly getting weirder. Trump veered from calling it a, quote, hoax to saying now the Democrats are hiding something. This weekend, J.D. Vance saying Trump wants to be, quote, fully transparent while admitting in the very next breath that the administration is still working on that whole transparency thing.
The president has said very clearly, because we've had other meetings about that, is that he wants us to be fully transparent and he wants the credible information out there. So we're working to compile the thousands and thousands of documents that are out there for full transparency.
Joining me now is Asha Rangappa, former FBI special agent and senior lecturer with Yale University, and Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent with Vanity Fair and an MSNBC political analyst. Thank you so much. Her latest book is How to Lose Your Mother. Asha, we'll start with you. I want to make this clear because I think that sometimes people get caught up in the sort of nuances and details of how these judges are ruling one way or another. The judge basically said, look, there's no reason to go through this fight to unseal this information because it's not going to add anything new. Is that common, right? Is it common for a judge to say that, look, unsealing this isn't going to add anything to the case. You're not going to use me as a distraction. Is that something that we see often in these kinds of investigations, or is it just another sign of how desperate Trump is to find some sort of distraction?
I don't hear.
Asha, we're having a little bit of trouble.
Sorry about that. The Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure actually list out the exceptions for being able to release grand jury information, that it is secret unless it meets one of these exceptions. And the reasoning provided by the government here didn't meet any of those exceptions. So to answer your question, yes, it's common. The rules state that these are not released unless they meet certain criteria, which they don't in this case. So I think this was expected from the get-go. And it does seem like this was sort of a fait accompli and maybe a way to just blame the judges, like, oh, well, we can't do anything, they didn't release it. And you see the judge sort of taking pains to, make clear that this was a pointless request to be made in the first place.
Right. And Molly Jong-Fast, this is the thing about this. After a judge says, hey, there's nothing in here, there's nothing here, there's nothing in the magic hat, right? From a legal standpoint, what else does Trump have available to him? I mean, I know that they're probably scrambling around trying to find some other distraction, but what's the next thing that they might think of doing? Because if they can't stand on these sort of, unreleased pieces of testimony and, they've already moved Ghislaine Maxwell to a safer prison, what's their next legal strategy? Or are they just going to try and throw as many other things at the wall in hopes that the American people and their own base stop paying attention?
Yeah, look, I think that this is a case where they have all this information. They can just release it, right? I mean, that's it. So, this is not some tricky, new math. Like, you have thousands of pages of paper, you have videos, you have some of the stuff can't be released because obviously it's pornography. But, there's certainly quite a lot that you have. Pam Bondi was bragging about having it on her desk. So maybe there wasn't a client list, but there was certainly something on her desk. The whole plan about putting, this grand jury testimony was going to be much less than what they have. And there's a much higher standard for releasing grand jury testimony. So they knew, I feel like there was this was a way to try to buy time to keep it going, right? And then, but the answer is these people still haven't forgotten. They have all these documents. They can just release them. It's just a question of whether or not they want to release them, which, of course, they clearly do not want to release them.
Asha, I want to play this sound from Michael Cohen about what kinds of activities and behaviors Trump might have engaged in with Epstein, and get your thoughts on the other side.
As you know, I've made plenty of predictions, and I'm going to make another one here. Number one, I don't believe that Donald Trump was on Epstein's island. Now, is he in the file? Absolutely. Why? He's in the black book. He took free flights with Epstein down to Palm Beach. If he turns around and says that he was never on the island, rest assured, he's going to use that as the basis for why this whole thing, again, is a witch hunt against him.
So, Asha, here's the thing, and help me out here, because Michael Cohen certainly has a lot of amazing insight. Let's say Donald Trump comes out and says, yeah, I was never on the island. That's sort of the equivalent of saying, well, I wasn't in the bank when it was robbed, but I help everybody count the money and sell all the things from the safe deposit box with a fence, right? Like, what would be the value of this administration at this point trying to nitpick and geo-track where Trump is when it's still clear that he had a relationship with Epstein?
Yeah, this is what has puzzled me from the beginning, that he has had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. We knew that. It's pretty obvious that he's going to surface in these files in some way.
The judge said what we were all thinking effectively, right? The judge is not against more transparency. I don't think this was a ruling that meant to say that there should be no more discussions about the lists and the files and who's in them and who's not in them, but more to say that, one, grand jury testimony is a specific type of document, and opening those is a rare thing, right? Like, we understand that, right? Like, for example, let's say Trump wanted to unseal grand jury testimony of the cases against him, all the charges that were brought against him. And maybe publish them so that people could take, I guess, revenge on the people that voted to bring charges against him. These things are kept hidden, I think, for a reason, right? The deliberations and whatnot. But the judge is saying that the reason that Trump and his team wanted to do this wasn't because they wanted to actually give the people the file. That's the spin. Trump and his team are saying, oh, this mean old judge, we wanted to give you the Epstein stuff. We tried our best, but the big bad wolf, the big bad judge says, Mr. President, you're not allowed. And Trump's like, oh, geez, I guess we failed, you know. But the reality, what the judge said was that this is selective and it's clearly manipulated. And as everyone's noted, if you want the real info that goes beyond the specific charges against Epstein and Maxwell and those two in particular, that's where you have to go beyond the grand jury stuff, because the grand jury stuff might tangentially mention other co-conspirators, unindicted people, witnesses, people that may have been tangentially involved. But it's going to primarily focus on, should we charge these individuals for these charges? And if yes, we go ahead with it. And if not, the grand jury, that's where it ends, right? There's no charges filed. If you want the actual dirt on who's on the list, who, in terms of selling this business that Maxwell and Epstein had, who were the clients? Who were the people on the plane? Who were the people that were around and didn't necessarily do anything directly, but certainly had enough of an inkling and maybe chose to stay quiet? That's the kind of info that they're hiding, and this had nothing to do with the judge.